On behalf of OSBP, we thank you for joining us today. We started this webinar series as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic as a way to continue outreach, but received such rave reviews, we decided to keep it going, committing to hosting at least 3 webinars a month. The Department of Navy recognizes small businesses are the catalyst of innovation, and we use this platform as a way to attract new business partners. You can view previously recorded events on our website under the Outreach tab and Past Events, or visit our YouTube channel. I would like to direct you to our website at www.secnav.navy.mil/small-business, where you can find a wealth of information, including our Department of Navy Office of Small Business Programs Operations Plan. You can locate your small business professional and find information on how to do business with the Department of the Navy, including the Command's Long-Range Acquisition Forecast. To stay current on DON OSBP upcoming events, you can register for our mailing list on the homepage of our website. To stay up to date about upcoming industry days across the Department of the Navy, any Command's outreach, and in general, what's happening across the DON, I also encourage you to connect with us on our social media platforms, including Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. Next week, we will host a webinar featuring the Small Business Office at the U.S. Air Force, so please get registered for that event, and we look forward to seeing you there. Today, we have a dynamic panel from NASA. Mr. Glenn Delgado is the Associate Administrator of the Office of Small Business Programs at the National Aeronautics and Space Administration. As the Associate Administrator, Mr. Delgado provides executive leadership and policy direction for developing and implementing policies and initiatives that ensure that all categories of small businesses are afforded opportunities to compete for agency contracts. I hope you seize the opportunity to ask questions using the Q&A feature on this platform, and please join me in welcoming Mr. Glenn Delgado and his team. Thank you, Mr. Delgado. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Washington. I appreciate it. I'm always honored to help out my fellow people over at the Navy, considering that's where most of my roots are from. I grew up doing contracting in Navy, and once was in that office where you're now serving. So my privilege to come do part of your webinar series, and I appreciate you doing this. Excuse me. I'm going to give you guys an overview of just how to do business with NASA. Also, as I looked at the criteria for the webinar, they also asked that we talk a little bit about our procurement. So I asked one of the SESs over in the procurement department to come do a little presentation, because we are shifting how we buy to match a little bit with category management, and also to be very efficient on how we're doing our procurements these days. So she's going to explain a little bit of that, which will be Miss Julia Wise, and you'll see her coming up after I do my quick presentation. And then following Miss Wise will be Mr. Robert Jones. He's part of our SBIR program. As you know, NASA's a very unique agency. There's not many other federal agencies that do trips to the moon and Mars and beyond, and launch satellites and probes to Pluto and Jupiter. So we do things a little different. We do a lot of R&D. And so I just want to give you an idea of what we are and who we are, and go from there. So if you can do my first slide, I greatly appreciate it. Ms. White. Well, hopefully. Well, what you'll see, we go. I forget there's a little lag in these things sometimes. Okay, if you can go to the next slide. This will just give you an idea of where we are, or where we finished last fiscal year. This is the closeout of FY20. You can see we did over $18 billion, and of that, 3.1, almost 3.2 billion went directly to small business from our office. And when I show you our trend chart, you can see that over the last 5 years, small business is big business at NASA, and we have steadily climbed in both our prime awards and our sub awards. And a lot of it's because we do a lot of outreach. We do a lot of webinars like this one, so we can reach new people for our industrial base once they understand how to do business with us in the NASA. So you can see from the numbers there, Like most other federal agencies, we do struggle a little bit with HubZone and Service Disabled Veteran. A lot of those are, there's not a lot in our field of R&D, which is our biggest expenditure, which I'll show you in a second that when we look at our top NAICS codes. So we are always looking for people there, but a lot of them also come to us with, you know, I'm a vet and I'm a HubZone, what can you do for me? I always like to turn that question to them of, what procurement of ours are you interested in looking at and talking to us about? So I know that they're familiar with us, and I'll go into that a little bit more. You go to the next slide. This will give you an idea of where we are as of this January just passed. You can see we're only, you know, at $4 billion in expenditures and 6.5, I mean, actually 652 million to small business. Historically, most of our dollars do get awarded in the third and fourth quarter. So these numbers don't alarm me much. You can see we're right at our negotiated goal with SBA. And a lot of people are going, oh, wait, I thought it was 23%. Is what every agency is supposed to strive for. There are exceptions to that, and we are one of them based on the nature of what we buy. So a lot of our stuff does have to go to large businesses, you know, the Boeing, the Lockheeds, the SpaceXs, and that kind of stuff, because we don't have a lot of mom and pop shops that can build the rockets and get us into outer space. Next slide. Now, this is what I was talking about with our trend chart. This one goes all the way back to 2014 through 19. The reason we haven't updated this for FY20 yet is because we don't have the subcontracting numbers solidified yet. Those in the business know we just closed out the SRS and the ESRS numbers, and they're not public yet. So as soon as they go public, we'll update this chart for FY20 numbers also. But as you can see, if you look at it here, in FY19, we did 3.073, and our FY20 numbers on the prime already show we did 3.1, almost $3.2 billion to small businesses, a prime number. We're waiting on that subcontracting number, and you can see our total spend jumped from 17.6 bill already to 18.1. So we're spending the money. A lot of it is going large, but as you can see, we have a steady climb on our small business prime awards. And again, it's just because we do aggressively look for small businesses to do business with us. We're doing a lot of training with them. We're working with them with SBIR, and we're having them to make sure that they understand who we are and what we buy and how we buy it. And it shows in our numbers and our results. Looking at these last 5 years, you can just see the steady climb. And that's why, you know, it's not just a motto where small business is big business at NASA. It is our job, and we do it kind of well. Next slide. Okay, as I talked to before, this is our top 20 NAICS codes, just so you can get a feel of where we spend our money. You can look at the big jump. Of course, we are a research and development agency, so most of our dollars, over 50% of our 18 billion, goes into research and development, okay, in the sciences. So you see $9.4 billion going directly out the door in R&D, and then the next NAICS code drops all the way down to 2.4 billion. So if you're in the R&D business, NASA's the place that you really want to look at, because that is, you know, as I said, 50% of our total spend goes that way out the door. And then after that, you're looking at the, you know, engineering services, which is only in the $890 million mark, and then going down from there. But you can see, just like every other federal agency, we do buy normal things, quote unquote. We do facilities, we do guard services, you know, we do, you know, computer services, admin services, things of that nature, but not at the volume that those in the DoD world do. You know, where, you know, NASA's more infamous for buying onesies and twosies of things versus buying 600 million widgets, you know, like DoD does. So you really need to know our business and to understand that, and that's how I'm trying to get you there today to help you out. Let me go to the next slide. Okay, these are the names of our large prime contractors, our top 20. A lot of people see California Institute of Technology at the top. It's also infamously known as JPL. A lot of people think that JPL is a NASA center. It is actually an FFRDC, which is a federally funded research and development center. So to us, we treat them almost as we do Lockheed, Boeing, Northrop, all the rest of them. They are a large prime to us. And at the beginning of every fiscal year, we usually put about $2.8 to $3 billion out the door to JPL to do our research, because they're doing a lot of the Mars rovers, moon rovers, things of that nature. So they are really a large prime to us. So it's really good to look at what they're buying. As you can see, again, almost $3 billion to our next company, which is Boeing, and that's at $1.4 billion. So it pays to look at where we're spending our money. We're sending it to JPL to do a lot of our research. So it pays to look at JPL as a large prime. They do sub out quite a bit of that $2.8 billion. Now, then as you go down the line, you see Boeing, Lockheed, Northrop, Jacobs, and then SpaceX is there. And then going down the line, you'll see the rest of the large primes that we do business with. And as you can see, out of that $18 billion that goes out the door, 13.3 billion of it goes to our large prime partners. So a lot of that money does go out the door, and that other 3 billion, goes out the door to small business, has primes, and then the other goes out as subs and subcontracting plans. So you will get these slides so you can get to look at them a little later, and you can really study them alone. Next slide. Okay, and now you see the relevance of subcontracting, as I talked about at NASA. A lot of our dollars do go out the door. As I say, over $3 billion are awarded to our large primes. So, I hear a lot of small businesses that say, well, I don't really want to be a prime. I mean, a sub. I'd rather be the prime and control stuff. But guess what? Our people at our fields know who does the work. So even if we have JPL, Lockheed, Boeing, whoever has the contract, they do know and take the time to watch the subcontractors that do the work, because they understand that the subcontractors are really getting their hands on when they do business with NASA. So they watch and they see if you're ready to do prime work themselves, because just like in any business, if you do business with people okay, so this way you can get in the door, you can start building past performance, you start getting name recognition, and most importantly, you get paid. Okay, one of the things we do is make sure our large primes pay their subs on time. One of the other unique things about NASA is when we do subcontracting, we do it on total contract value. So whatever the total contract value is, and we say subcontracting is 20%, it's 20% of that contract price. Where other agencies look at it, they do 20% of the dollars that are subcontracted. So we make sure that we have really opportunities, because if you do subcontracting based on the dollars that are subcontracted, that number can change on occasion to where, we had to do a make-buy decision internal. So instead of subbing out $10 million, we're only going to sub out $5 million. So now you get 20% of the $5 million, not 20% of the $10 million. So at NASA, we do it based on total contract value. So if the contract value doesn't change and they make a make-buy decision, it doesn't matter to me. You still owe me 20% of that total contract value. Okay, not necessarily the subcontracted dollars. So it's really important to look at subcontracting when you look at NASA. You get your skills, you get past performance, you build relationships, and those are the key things in going forward to doing business with us and the rest of the federal government even. Next slide.
Mr. Delgado, we do have one question.
Yes, ma'am.
This company builds metal parts.
A lot of echo. Let me turn off my mic for a second and see if I can hear you better.
Thank you, sir. This company builds metal and composite parts with 3D printing. We know that NASA buys the kind of things that we make, but don't have a roadmap to the right people that specify and procure these types of products. Do you have a roadmap where someone can go to navigate how to be procurement ready? Who do I contact if this is what I'm selling? Who's that individual at NASA that we should contact? Over.
Okay. Actually, you stepped perfectly into the next presentation, which is Ms. Julia Wise from Procurement. I'll lay that out. We'll actually show you what we buy, where we buy it, and how we buy it. But just to give you a little tidbit, Marshall Space Flight Center would probably be the best place for you to look, because they do a lot of the fabrication stuff. that we're looking at, and I'll have that information for you in the next couple of slides. But pay attention very carefully to what Ms. Wise is presenting, and you'll see how all of our procurements are lining up across our 10 centers. You know, very similar to the Navy, where again, I came from in my roots. They have 10 buying commands. At NASA, we actually have 10 centers. You know, most of you might not have heard of some of them. You know, the big ones of Kennedy and Johnson, you know, and maybe even Marshall and JPL, but we have centers in Cleveland, Ohio. We have some in Langley, Virginia. You know, so there's it's spread out, and I'll show you how each of them is set up in a second. This one we can do very quickly. This is just our scorecard achievement. So you can see 17 to 19, we're doing pretty good at meeting our goals and getting the dollars out the door. We're doing straight A's, and hopefully FY20, when I put that up there, you'll see another A in a row also. And we're doing pretty good. You can go to the next slide.
So while we're flipping to the next slide, can we take a step back to the small business participation that you were talking about, those subcontracting goals? Does NASA have standard language for small business participation using the total contract value? Is small business ever evaluated as a factor, where more small business participation is rated higher?
And the answer to that is yes. We have clauses in section L and M, which are standard clauses in any RFP. You know, L tells you what we're looking for, and M tells you how we're going to evaluate it. I say I've been in this job 14, almost 15 years now, and we got that in about, I want to say about 7 to 9 years ago. We got that as a standard clause in our contracts, so in our RFPs, I should say. So yes, they are in there. And I can, you know, we can, if you send a note to my office, we can actually probably send them to you, or Julia can talk to you about them a little bit. But yes, we have standard clauses in L&M, and even if you look at how we collect our information on our ISRs and SSRs, we actually have another place because, excuse me, the way the rest of the federal government is set up is total subcontracted value. And we have to add another column in our ISRs to put it at total contract value by subcontracting value. So our large primes have to report it both ways, of the percentage of subcontracted dollars and the percentage of total contract dollars. So yes, we are all on it. We take good care of it. And yes, it is a straight up evaluation of criteria, and it is rated separately. Our people sit on every one of the RFP boards, and we do our analysis of the subcontracting plans, and we hold people's feet to the fire. Okay, so hopefully that answered their question. Then the next slide I have up, and thank you very much, Ms. White, I appreciate that. This is, again, true for every federal agency. You have to start with the small business center, the small business specialist at any center or any place you want to do business with, okay? Because they are the ones that know where the money is, they know where the requirements are, okay? And they're the ones that have to sign off for it. You know, a lot of people try to make appointments with me, and I'm like, why do you need to talk to me? You need to talk to the SBS at the center level, because NASA does an average of about 35,000 transactions a year. Okay, if it reaches my desk, that means it's a problem child. Okay, and you really don't want to have to bid on the problem children. Okay, but at the 10 centers, I have an excellent team of small business specialists. They have relationships with all of their technical codes, and their procurement people, so they know what the requirements are, when they're going out with them, how much money, all that kind of stuff. So they would be the ones that can tell you about what's going on at their center. That's why it's crucial for you to do your homework to find out what center is buying what you sell, okay? Because you can't go to a flight center and tell them that you're doing R&D work, okay? They're like, well, go to the R&D centers, okay? Things of that nature. So you got to look at that. I just talked about learning the various missions at the different centers. One of the key things is that third bullet, and this is, again, true everywhere, but very specifically true with us. When we send out sources sought synopsises and requests for information, we ask very specific questions, maybe 3, 5, 7, 9, or 10 questions. The big mistake that small businesses make is they staple a copy of their capability brief or their elevator pitch to the sources sought and send it back to us. What do you think is going to happen to that? Nothing, because we asked you 6 questions or 8 questions. You did not answer the questions. So it's just like you did not reply. So therefore, it makes my job harder, because now I can't set it aside for small business because we got no legitimate replies back. So we have to go full and open. Then, of course, as soon as I go full and open, I get 15 phone calls. Why didn't you set that aside for small business? We could do that. One, did you answer the sources sought? And then did you answer it correctly? Did you respond to the 5, 6, 7 questions? The answer is no. My hands are tied. That's where all the decisions are made. And then to even complicate the matter a little bit, if we don't get intelligent replies back from the small business community, we also decide then and there what our percentage of subcontracting goals will be based on the replies that we get. We might not be able to get small businesses that can do the whole thing, so therefore it goes out full and open, but we got 10 responses that say that when we add them up, they can do approximately 35, 40% of the deal, okay, of the procurement. So guess what? We set our small business goals, our subcontracting goals at that percentage, because we know that people can answer the mail on this particular part of the statement of work, this part of the statement of work, or this part of the statement of work. So it is critical that people answer the sources sought and the RFIs and answer them to the questions that we're asking. Do not just staple your elevator pitch or your brochure to it. Okay, and then the last thing, this is, pretty much everybody knows, look at the agency acquisition forecast, use your P-tax. They are gold. They don't charge you much, if not anything, and you can get a ton of information. They can help you with a lot of the problems you have. Of course, the SBA, that's their whole job. And then use your trade associations, like the Hub Zones or Women Chamber of Commerce, things of that nature, because they also have a wealth of information, and they do a lot of lobbying and things of that nature that can help particular situations. Outreach events we know are morphing. Like, for instance, we're doing this now instead of in person. Most of us miss the days of being out there, because that's where you really build relationships. You get to meet people, you get to know them. Not that this is a little impersonal, but hey, you're looking at me sitting in my family room, So it's a lot better when we sit and talk with each other, and hopefully, God willing, we'll be back to there, in a few more years or a year or whatever it takes to get us there. Next slide.
So while we're going to the next slide, in this COVID environment, how is it that you recommend these small businesses reach out to your small business professionals? And then with that, how can they locate their contact information? Do you have a website or maybe an app that you've developed that you'd like to highlight?
It sounds like I paid somebody to ask these questions. Yes, we have an app, and yes, we have the website and all that, and I'll get to that in 1 second. But yes, to answer all of those, and still the best thing is always reach out to the SBS, the Small Business Specialist. Right in front of you now, you see how we have them broken out. We show you which ones are our research centers, which ones are our space centers, which one's our science center, and then which one does all the agency-wide procurements. Like, they handle all of our P cards and anything that we buy centrally. Our National Shared Services Center has it. Each of our centers have a mailbox specifically for small business. So you'll see the ARC, which is Ames Research Center, dash small business at mail.nasa.gov. So, and these are going all the way down the line. And the numbers you see there are the direct phone numbers to the small business specialists at their desk, which of course now they have forwarded to, so they can work from home. And you see the actual person's name, and now you get an idea of where the research dollars go, where the space dollars go, and going down the line there. We're not shy about putting that information out there. Next slide. Boom, 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 boom. Okay, now this is where I think the reason why NASA does much better at small business than some other agencies do. We put out these things called active contract listings, or ACLs as we call them. If you really think about it and know the federal government and on how they buy their items, approximately 64 to 72%, depending on the agency, they spend their money on reoccurring buys. Okay, usually only about 20, 30% is purchased as a new procurement, something that the agency has never purchased before. A lot of it is always redundant stuff that we borrow. We always buy engineering services. We always buy, security guards. We always buy facilities, lawn mowing service, whatever it might be. So what we did about 4 years ago, 5 years ago, probably, if not longer, we put together every one of our active contracts. And if you know anything about the federal acquisition cycle, it's usually 18 to 24 months to take us to get a contract in place. So what we did is we went out and we found every contract, every NAICS code, every contract name, the contract number, the current contractor incumbent, how we did the competition last time, the value of it, and most importantly, the end date. Excuse me. So you guys are aware of everything that you need. We're almost helping you with your business development. So you know the NAICS code, you know how we got it last time is a small business set aside, a competitive 8A, full and open, women-owned set aside, even sole source. And more importantly, you know when it ends. So therefore, if you know we take 18 to 24 months to get the re-procurement out, you guys should be doing your homework by that time, looking at what the product, looking at what the contract calls for, see who the incumbent is. Either you might want to team with them and tell them how they can get it done cheaper, faster, better, or you do a FOIA, Freedom of Information, you get the statement of work of the contract, and then you can start putting together your own team or your own proposal. And then you'll know when we have to have the new one out in place because we tell you right there on the sheet. So I don't know how much more we could spoon feed you, if you know what I mean. We're doing your B&D for you. Just go to the FOIA library, and if anybody else has ever FOIA'd it before, you get it for free because we sit it in our library shelves and you can download it. Okay, and then do your work, do your homework, do your business development, and then you'll see why our numbers keep going up in small business, because we try to make sure we make it as friendly as possible. Okay, next slide.
So while we're on that slide and we're looking at prime contracts, who is your prime contractor? Can you talk a little bit about the cybersecurity needs for NASA? And this company is looking for that prime contractor, maybe looking at teaming related.
Well, for cybersecurity, NASA has probably, just a speculated guess, 30 to 50 contracts. And I'll let Julia talk a little bit about how we're going to be moving that in the future. But let me just pick, security, computer security, cybersecurity is a huge monster right now. We don't have one contract that does it. You'd have to pull the ACL sheet that we have for IT and look at that and study it. Again, talk to the SBSs at the center where you see most of the contracts out, but more importantly, listen to what Julia's going to be telling you in a couple of minutes. So that's why I'll shut up a little bit and she can tell you the roadmap of how we're going to be buying stuff in the future, which is critical that you hear what she's saying. Okay, so we'll go to the next slide again real quick. Or did I do the other one already? Go back one. Let's make sure that was the one I was on before. Yeah, it is. Yep. Okay, so that's critical. Again, listen to what Julia's going to say. Now, I'll just give you another thing. We do a lot of work with HBCUs and MSIs, so teaming with them is not a bad thing, especially with the SBIR program and STTR program. We are the only federal agency in the government that has a goal for HBCUs because we think that it's that important to make sure that we look at diverse resources that are out there instead of always going to the MITs, the Yales, the Harvards. We need to make sure we get their diverse view of everything that's out there. So we do have an HBCU MSI goal. You see the next one that we're looking at, an engagement workshop, is on February 23rd, and you can find all this on our website. Next one. And I'll give you all the countdown, the information to that. We do, just like Navy's doing, we're doing our own big matchmaking event coming up on on March 3rd. So you can again join us. Right now, I think we already have like 500-600 people signed up for this one. We're doing it in coordination with the Charleston County in South Carolina. And we do usually 2 to 3 big ones a year like this. And then, of course, we participate in, I can't even tell you, the last 30 days, I've done 4 or 5 of these pitches, with Women Chamber of Commerce, with the the women of Prince George's County, now at Navy. So we do a lot of outreach and pitching and tell you guys how to get to us. Next slide. I think this is the one where everybody's looking for. Nope, this is our learning series. So we're doing business with, how to do business with Langley. Now, what to know before you go. So we do, like the February 17th one coming up this week. We tell people how to get ready for the outreach event that we're doing on March 3rd. This is the kind of questions you need to do. This is where you need to be registered in, and this database and so on and so forth. So we usually average 300 to 500 people at our webinar series, and most of them have been very insightful, and we're getting a lot of great feedback on them. Like I tell you before, if you want to do anything that's agency-wide contract, Troy Miller's doing one on March 17th, which I believe is St. Patrick's Day, on how to do business with NASA Shared Services Center. They are the ones that handle all of our agency-wide type contracts, and Julia will touch upon that of where things are heading to. So just again, you'll get these slides so you can look at them. Next slide. Bingo. Here we go. Okay, so this is how you find us. Of course, this is our website, real simple, www.osbp, which is Office of Small Business Programs.nasa.gov. Our email is even harder, smallbusiness@nasa.gov. And we can get anything back. We have people just dedicated to watching the phone lines and watching the websites and answering the questions. As you can see, we have our own learning series, we have our outreach, and then in answer to that other question, yes, we have the mobile app that's available from Apple as well as the Google Store, I guess they call it, and it's available on all platforms, phones, tablets, desktops. We get a lot of great feedback from the mobile app, and right now, actually, but it's up for discussion, the only place that you can get our ACLs, our active contract listings, are on the NASA mobile app. It is free, doesn't cost anybody anything but me. I won't even tell you the checks I got to write to keep that thing going. But that's the place right now to get our ACLs. So you'll see all of the ACLs for all of our contracts, all of our centers on the mobile app. And then we have a very, very strong social media presence. I'm not going to put out numbers, but there's not any federal agency even close to us in the number of followers for Twitter and all that kind of stuff. I have people that do that because I'm one of these old guys. I don't do a lot of social media, Facebook, Twitter, or whatever else we do, but I know my team does a great job with that. And the numbers they show me, I don't think they're lying to me, but the numbers they show me show that we're doing really, really well and reaching the public and everything that we need to do. Okay, and I think that might be my last slide. And then I can introduce Julia. Yes. Okay, so yes, question?
Sir, yes. Two questions. Do your sources sought appear on Beta SAM, or do they come from your contracting officers directly to the small businesses?
Well, they go to beta.sam, as well as we have a thing called the NASA vendor database, but we're in the middle of, I say, restructuring it, I guess, because of security issues and other things that are going on. So yes, be more attentive than beta.sam, as well as my team's sending me all these messages now. But we used to, the database, I'm not 100% on it right now at this point because it's in flux. But if you had signed up for our NASA vendor database and tell us the NAICS codes you're interested in, it would automatically send you messages when we put out any thing in that NAICS code for either a sources sought or an RFI. So I can glance a little bit at my messages as Julia does her pitch, and I can see what they're yelling about of our VPNs down. But anyway, I'll introduce now Ms. Julia Wise. She's the Director of the Procurement Management and Policy Division of the Office of Procurement. As I said earlier, everybody in the world knows what category management is. NASA, of course, has to still play in a sandbox with everybody else. So we're doing a lot of things similar to category management. We still have to meet all our goals there, but also in order to be more efficient. So like, for instance, for physical security, right now we have 10 centers, we have 10 contracts for guard services and whatever else, fire and police and whatever else on that center. So instead of having 10 source boards, 10 evaluations out there, we now are looking at how we can regionalize that. So instead of having 10, we might have only 3, okay, or something along those lines, which would be multiple award type contracts. And then in the spirit of category management, again, I work very closely with the Office of Procurement. They're really good to me and I'm good to them. And we set aside things. So like every security contract at NASA has to be a small business set aside, period, amen. Okay, and we're looking at several other categories of things that we buy that we are going to make mandatory, that they have to be a small business set aside. And then after that, they can do whatever procurement strategy. If they want to do women-owned, hub zone bets, that's based on, again, how the information comes back on the sources sought. And Miss Julia Wise will give you a little taste of that. So with that, I would love to introduce Julia, a good friend of mine up in procurement. Hopefully, as soon as she gets her mic off of you. I think you're still on mute, Julia. We don't hear you. I see you. Still can't hear you.
So while Destiny and Julia triage that, we have another question, Mr. Delgado, in the app. What will be NASA's relationship in terms of programs and budget with the new DoD Space Force?
Honest answer, I don't know that because Space Force is a little new. I know several of our mission directorates, as we call them, because we have like Human Space Flight Office, we have Aeronautics Research, we have Science Research, we have Space Technology. I know Space Tech and I think Aero are dealing with Space Force a little bit. I know they're starting to develop MOUs, but to my knowledge, we're not purchasing anything with them yet.
Okay, Julia, can we hear you?
Can you hear me?
Yes,
Now we can.
Okay, great.
I'll leave that to you now. How'd you get away?
All right, thank you so much, Glenn. I appreciate the opportunity to talk to Department of Navy. My name is Julia Wise, and I am the Director of the Procurement Management and Policy Division within the Office of Procurement. We have a new AA for Procurement. Her name is Ms. Carla Smith-Jackson. And then also our Deputy AA for Procurement is Bill Rhodes. And Jeff Cullen is also my colleague in the Office of Procurement. He is the Director of Procurement Strategic Operations Division in the Office of Procurement. And we represent the leadership team for the Office of Procurement. So I want to talk a little bit about what NASA has done. Next slide, please. With regards to transforming how we buy across the centers. NASA's vision, as you can see here, is to explore and execute innovative, effective, and efficient acquisition business solutions to optimize capabilities and operations that enable NASA's mission. One of the things we're doing here is we're looking to figure out how we can execute the mission while also streamlining and looking out for our people, procuring properly, and developing sound, flexible procurement practices, as well as delivering procurement policies that are going to be clear and easy to implement across the centers. Next slide, please. As Glenn mentioned, we have about 10 centers that buy differently across the NASA enterprise, and they buy to suit their different center missions. What we are doing with some of our institutional product and service lines is that we know across our 10 centers, and we have headquarters and also our NASA management office, across those 10 centers, we buy at least 23 product and service lines very differently across those centers. So about 2 or 3 years ago, we established an enterprise delivery model that would allow us to really think about how we buy. As you can see there from the slide, we buy, NASA spends approximately 85% of its budget on acquiring goods and services. Just in FY20, procurement spend alone was $18.9 billion. And we completed approximately 25,000 procurement actions. And that includes awards, modifications, but it does not include grants and cooperative agreements. And we managed in excess of over 9,000 instruments. Next slide, please. So in looking across our 10 centers, we said we need to really think about how we can buy strategically across the centers. As I mentioned before, we buy at least 23 product and service lines that we call institutional. And by that, we mean that, for example, we may buy aircraft operations, engineering, propellants, guard services. We may buy those at every center, but in the past, we were buying them differently and paying different prices for them differently across the centers. So with this enterprise delivery model, we have decided to say, okay, we're going to take a strategic approach to how we buy for our centers. And we have decided that we're no longer going to be a decentralized buying office for these particular product and service lines, but we're going to establish a centralized approach to how we buy these product and service lines. So why did we choose this approach? Because again, as Glenn mentioned, there is an enterprise, or I should say agency-wide effort under OMB to do more of category management, to strategically buy how you are procuring your certain products and services. And so that's what NASA has done. And this also will allow us to develop a procurement, technical, and industry expertise in certain areas where we're going to be centralizing our buys. We're going to leverage our best practices and capabilities across the enterprise. And we're going to, again, meet the federal mandates of really trying to control our spend under management and utilizing our best-in-class contracts that are already out there across the federal government. The benefits of this approach that we're using, where we're going to strategically buy at our different centers certain products and service lines, is that it's going to enable an enterprise management of the products and service lines. It's going to improve our spend under management. It's also going to eliminate unnecessary contract redundancies across the centers. Like I mentioned earlier on, we in the past, and until we transition everything, we buy guard service differently across the agency, but we're standardizing that, and we're actually we're strategically establishing an approach as to how we're going to buy that for all centers across the agency. It's also going to maximize small business opportunities in this new enterprise model. And it's going to improve how we operate and how we how we represent ourselves as one NASA to industry. Next slide. Now, this is a pretty busy slide, but all I really want to show you here is that we have a governance model for how we did all of this. And it really speaks to just the communication of how we established this enterprise delivery model, how we communicated it across the agency, how we had to establish different roles and within NASA to really implement this enterprise delivery model. We have established what we call procurement portfolio managers, and I would really suggest that you all know who those folks are. We will have a link in this particular presentation that will take you to who those people are on my staff and my colleague's staff. His name is Jeff Cullen. I mentioned his name earlier at the outset of the briefing. We have procurement portfolio managers that work for us, and they work across the centers with also another group that's called the Enterprise Requirements Manager to work to figure out how we're going to standardize not only the contracting portion of it, but also the requirements documents that we're actually procuring these the PSLs for. Next slide. Now, this is what Glenn was mentioning earlier on. When I talk about centralizing and how we've really worked to figure out how we're going to have certain buying locations across the enterprise, as opposed to having every center buy every guard service, every center buy logistics, every center buy communications. We have established buying locations across the different NASA enterprises that will buy certain what we call product and service lines. For example, if you can see in the chart, and I've also provided this as a handout, the chart by itself, you will see there, for example, you'll see in the area of protective services. Protective services is a regional product and service line that's going to be managed out of Ames, Goddard, and KSC. Now, if you're tracking from earlier, in my earlier presentation, you would have seen the 10 centers that really outline what it is their mission is. But every center does not need to buy or be the lead for protective services. So we have now made it a regional approach, and we have 3 centers that are going to buy across the centers for those services. Ames will buy on the West Coast for Ames and Armstrong. Goddard will buy on the East Coast for Goddard, Langley, GRC, and headquarters. And KSC will buy the Florida area, and they're going to manage for Florida, JSC, Marshall, and Stennis. And so that's how that particular product and service line is going to be approached. We also have a centralized approach where we're going to be having certain product service lines purchased centrally by certain buying locations. For example, acquisition support services, human capital, what we call ODEO and EEO services, cooperative agreements, subscriptions, simplified acquisitions, software, and our SBIR, STTR are actually going to come out of NSSC. That's all going to come out of that one buying location. Now, Langley is going to be responsible for administrative services and grounds maintenance. We also have GRC, which is going to be responsible for custodial services, centrally wide for across the agency. And then we have environmental remediation, propellants, and communication services will come out of KSC. That means that KSC is going to be the buying location for those particular product service lines. And then out of Guarded, we have our IT services coming out of Guarded. And then we also have logistics coming out of Marshall. And we have JSC also managing occupational health. We have other product services that are also coming out of different buying locations. For example, financial support services will be coming out of our Guarded Place 5 Center. And project planning and control, which we call PP&C, will also come out of Marshall. And so the list goes on. So really study this particular chart to understand how NASA has set up its buying locations and how each individual office is really set up to be the buying location for certain product and service lines. Now, mind you, these offices still are doing their regular contracting work under our programs and projects that are not listed here, but this chart only represents the product and service lines that we said we can now buy centrally across the agency or in some kind of centralized manner, as opposed to a decentralized manner, because in the past, again, we knew that every center was buying them individually, and that wasn't the most efficient way to buy things. So that's how we've established that approach. If you click in there where you see governance, you will see that NASA has already set up in our NASA FAR supplement an appendix that shows you which particular product and service lines we've already established enterprise procurement strategies for. And I would encourage you to go to that appendix periodically, because we do add any particular strategy that has been negotiated and has internally and has been added to the NASA FAR SEP. Let's see here. Just want to touch a little bit on the concept of operation. Again, we established a matrix procurement workforce that supports the buying office that is responsible for the procurement assignment. They will participate on SEBs, and administration may be performed locally. The local center leadership may also contact local POs and chiefs of contracting for all procurement inquiries. So we're working through this process that Glenn mentioned in terms of centralizing across the centers, how we're buying certain product service lines. And we're moving through this process. So I encourage you to work to look towards what we're doing in the appendix. We're actually going to have a link to that you can go to find out who our procurement portfolio managers are for each of these product and service lines. So you'll be able to reach out to them. But also, if you reach out to the small business specialists, they'll know exactly what we're doing as well, and so they can connect you to the procurement portfolio manager that is responsible for this product and service line. Let's see here. Okay, and then we did a lot of communication about the change that we are working on. And that's kind of stated up here in the presentation. What we did to really provide outreach, we worked, like Glenn said, we worked closely with his office. We worked with our functional owners, and we just to make sure that everyone understands what we're doing and why we're doing it. Next slide. Okay, so just to kind of highlight one of the changes that we made, Glenn talked a little bit about the IT space. And so one of the things we did to really, again, strategize how we buy certain institutional product and service line is that we established a centralized IT procurement office. We no longer are buying IT procurement at every IT product and services across every center. We are buying it from one buying location. And so we stood that up earlier at the end of last year. This position reports to the Office of Procurement, the AA for Procurement. and a centralized office with leadership and core staff hosted at Goddard. So that particular staff actually sits at Goddard Space Flight Center, but they're a separate entity. They're not a part of the Goddard Procurement Office. We did that to achieve consistency in how we procure our IT requirements and to enable greater commonality in implementing IT solutions. Doing this will also reduce duplication in IT contracting, leading to greater efficiencies. It's also going to provide consistent experience to industry. The scope of the IT Procurement Office does not include our PCOD software or a simplified acquisition threshold. And so as you can see there, we've listed some of the contracts that are currently falling under this IT Procurement Office. Also, their SOUP falls under that office as well. And then we'll also continue to identify and assess other IT procurements that need to fall under there. We took an incremental approach based on contract end dates, staffing availability, and the like. We pulled and we moved people from across the centers to support this particular office. So we have a good office set up to really establish how we're going to buy our IT products and services across the agency. And the procurement officer there, many of you may know him, his name is Marvin Horn. He's the one that's going to be heading that particular office.
So Ms. Wine, I have a question.
Okay.
If this company is supplying hard parts, we need a contact. Do we need to contact each center that will purchase flight parts or support hardware? As stated earlier, Marshall SFC will be the prime for parts purchases. Is that correct?
That's correct. But what I would encourage you to do is make sure you connect with your small business specialist. They have an exact mapping of what we're doing with our particular product and service lines, and they can connect you to the right office that's buying that, whatever it is you're supplying. So I think that's a good way to go. But I think if what you said was hardware for, then that would definitely go to Marshall. Yes.
And then the next question is, where do communication services fit in to the centralized IT procurement office?
So communication services are procured, or the buying location for communication services is Kennedy, known as KSC. And so all the communication services will come out of that office. Any IT component of that, if it is IT, strictly IT, of course, it would come out of the IT procurement office. But all of our communication services are coming out of KSC, and they're going to be doing, I believe, a regional approach to that for that particular PSL as well.
Great, thank you, ma'am. That's all we have for questions right now. We have about 7 minutes, and I know we have one more speaker we need to get through. So just want to be rid of everyone's time. So thank you.
Okay, just the last slide here. I've already talked about the IT procurement office. Just to kind of, next slide, just to reiterate some of the benefits. Oh, actually, let me see. So I was just going to kind of take you to the Appendix A because I have a link to the Appendix A, but when you get there, it doesn't take you exactly to the list of strategies. But if you see in this chart here, it says Appendix A, and then I want you to click on, when you get there on your own, Enterprise Procurement Strategies. And when you get there, you'll see all the different strategies that have been developed so far for the individual PSLs. And you can see the list there as well. We have a list of them already in the NASA FARSUP. We have construction, logistics, remediation, and so on. So I'll stop there. I have the next slide is just, I believe, the benefits. Next slide. Okay, this is just more of, what's in the Appendix A. And we do really talk about how our centers are to buy the various product and service lines. So they'll know when they get to Appendix A, and you will too, how we're buying and where we're buying from. Next slide. These are the benefits. I've already talked about them before, but I'll stop there. You can see the biggest benefit is it provides consistent solicitation and contracts across the agency, and it's also standardizing in how we buy, and it's making our procurements more efficient and effective across the centers. So I'll stop there, and I will take any questions at the end after our next speaker speaks. Thank you so much.
No, actually, this is Glenn. Since you only got about 3 minutes left, I think probably most of your audience does know how to do SBIR. So I think what we'll do is we can leave it open for questions since we only have like 3 or 4 minutes left. If anybody has that, instead of trying to fit a 15, 10-minute speech into 3 or 4 minutes, if you don't mind doing that way.
Absolutely. So we do have questions are popping in now. Does NASA have currently or plan to establish in the future a division for professional and management development training?
I can do that, Julia, or you can do it. Basically, that is one of the things that is being done out of NSSC, if my memory serves me correctly, Julia. So they would need to talk to Troy Miller down at NSSC, because that's where all of that is going to be centralized to, because they're going to be buying on an enterprise-wide basis for everybody. So NSSC would be your place to go there.
That's correct, Glenn.
And then the next question, I apologize.
It's okay.
I saw that NASA started matching private investment within the SBIR pipeline. Could you briefly describe that process? And do you think NASA will continue matching private investment?
Well, with that, we can have our next speaker up. Bob can answer that question for us.
Yeah, sure. So, yeah, since I ran out of time, yes. So in the phase 2, that's the second stage after the phase 1. They do accept the private money, and it's called the matching funds. So some company have to go out and look for investors. They bring the 50%, then the government will match the other 50%. Then on phase 3, that's more of a commercialization, and that's where the company will go out and look for the investors to fund the actual procurement. Now, phase 3 is like a sole source contract, so it's a very unique tool that you could use if you were in the SBIR world.
Great. Next question. Is there a Buy Green program for supplies and janitorial services?
Is there Buying Green?
A Buy Green campaign.
Buy Green program, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I can tell you that we centralize our custodial out at GRC. I believe we do have a Buying Green associated with that. I can link you up to that particular buying location to find out more, but I would imagine that we do have those requirements incorporated in our procurements as well.
Yeah, and what she meant by GRC is Glenn Research Center. The small business person out there is Miss Eunice Sips. So you can see on the chart that I have with everybody's name and phone number and website, you're looking for GRC, Glenn Research Center, and the SBS is Miss Eunice Sips.
Great. Well, that's all that we have time for today. I see one more question popped in. They provide their contact information. We'll make sure we get that over to Ms. Wise to respond to that Buy Green campaign. So thank you all for joining us today. Mr. Jones, we unfortunately weren't able to get to you today, but maybe we can bring you back another day to do a web in the future. We'd like that. And thank you all for joining us, and stay safe and healthy.